The Great Evaluation. It happened on a Tuesday at exactly 3:14 p.m. Mura was walking through the crowded city square when the world didn't end, but it certainly changed. Inside her mind, she heard a sound that didn't belong to the air, a heavy metallic click like a massive deadbolt sliding into place across the heavens. Then, the silence fell. It wasn't just the absence of talking. It was the absence of everything. Mura watched as her glass of iced tea slipped from her fingers and struck the pavement. It shattered into 1,000 glittering diamonds, but there was no crash, no splash, and no sound from the bustling city behind her. Across the park, Kale stood frozen. He looked up at the sky, waiting for the roar of an airplane or the whistle of the wind, but the atmosphere felt like it had been wrapped in thick, heavy velvet. Then, a voice spoke directly into his soul, calm, vast, and terrifyingly neutral. "We have muted the channel to evaluate the quality of your signal." Humanity was left in a void for 24 hours. Mura and Kale, strangers moments before, found themselves standing in the middle of the silent plaza. Without words, they reached out and gripped each other's hands. They couldn't speak, so they looked deeply into each other's eyes, sharing a raw, wordless terror that bridged the gap between them. The world became a silent movie. Axel, a man who usually spent his days shouting into a phone, found himself sitting on a bench next to Micah, a street vendor. They didn't know each other's names, but as they watched a bird fly by without the sound of flapping wings, they shared a single, comforting nod that said more than 1,000 words. On Wednesday, at exactly 3:14 p.m., the world exploded. The sound returned with a physical force that knocked Mura to her knees. The screech of brakes, the chirp of a cricket, and the hum of the city air rushed back into her ears so violently that she had to cover them and weep from the sheer weight of the noise. The relief was a tidal wave. Mura found Kale in the crowd, and they didn't need to be strangers anymore. They embraced, laughing and crying as the beautiful messy noise of Earth, the shouting, the singing, the sirens, surrounded them once more. They believed they had passed the evaluation and were finally home. Far away in a quiet laboratory, a scientist named Vibran sat before a wall of monitors. He had been recording the atmosphere during the Great Silence using sensors that didn't rely on human ears. While the rest of the world celebrated the return of noise, Vibran stared at his data with a cold, sinking feeling in his chest. The audio monitor hadn't been flat during those 24 hours. Vibran isolated the high-frequency vibrations and sped the recording up by 1,000%. It wasn't the sound of Earth. It was a rhythmic, heavy thud that occurred at regular intervals, vibrating through the very fabric of space-time itself. Vibran stood by the window, looking up at the silent stars. He realized the truth that the rest of the world hadn't heard. The signal evaluation hadn't been a test to see if they were worthy. It was a check to see if the room was empty. The sound wasn't a heartbeat. It was the heavy, receding thud of giant footsteps walking away into the dark.